Um, Connor Henrik Fogel. I probably butchered that. How would you
Henrik
pronounce your
Fogel.
name?
No, it's close enough, close enough.
No. How do you pronounce your name?
It's Connor Fogel is my professional name. Henrik is my middle name, but yeah, Connor Fogel.
Okay, nice to meet you, Connor Fogel.
Pleasure.
Finally. Um, yeah. For people who don't know you, who are you? How would you describe yourself?
You know what, my career has so many sort of avenues and different things I juggle, so I normally say I do music. Very specifically, though, to us, I play the piano. I describe myself as a pianist slash musicologist, and I find that side of music just as important and incredibly interesting, and just as important as the performing side of the piano. And I work a great deal in theatre as well. I do lots of playing in the West End and in plays and in musicals and all of that sort of thing. So I say I'm a pianist, musicologist, musical director is my official title, but I tend to say I do music.
Nice. How long have you been playing the piano?
Too long.
And also, too long?
I think, oh gosh, I must have been about four or five when I started, and I'm 30 something now, so it's like coming up to 28 years, something like that, 27 years, which is wild. Yeah, playing far too long.
How did you get into it? I'm assuming parents?
No, there's no music in my family whatsoever. No one here is musical. I'm in my family home at the moment, but my granddad, for my 4th birthday, my granddad bought me a toy keyboard, which was tiny, and I've got it upstairs somewhere. Bought me this little keyboard for reasons that we're still not sure of, and I could just sort of pick out tunes on the thing, and I could play the jingles from commercials, and I could play TV theme tunes at quite a young age, and I can remember the patterns sort of making sense, and the patterns of the keys making sense to me, and notes making sense, and I could play by ear at a very young age. So it was kind of a freak accident, really, that it all came about. And I was obsessed with that thing. It was my favourite toy when I was growing up. And all I did was play this little keyboard. I take it to school with me. So yeah, just complete coincidence, complete accident I got into it.
I mean, that's awesome. That's always a great way to get into piano music, yeah. Yeah, I do find that playing the piano becomes a lot easier once you've recognized kind of the patterns of the keyboard's layout.
Yeah, right. I mean, I picked up violin and brass as well when I was in school. And yeah, being at the piano first, kind of, you can apply music to other instruments so much easier, because the piano is such a visual representation of music and of theory. And I will just buy random instruments now off eBay that I have no idea how to play, and just work them out and play with them for a week and then put them away. And yeah, the piano is a really useful sort of starter kit to just get to know music. And playing by ear is really helpful as well, because you can very visually see the distances between the tones and the semitones.
Yeah, that's a good segue into my next question, which is, you mentioned being able to play by ear. So I was wondering whether you are fond of or do any improvisation on the piano?
I don't improvise out of the joy of playing, and I don't put time aside to improvise at all. And improvisation is not something that I have a fond connection to. Having said that, I will say my work in theatre absolutely lends itself to improvisation, and improvisation is kind of a crucial skill in theatre, because often in these shows the score you're given is kind of a skeleton score, sort of like figured bass in that sense, where you just get given the chord symbols, or you just get given something very, very basic, and you have to elaborate upon that to turn it into something that sounds like a sort of full fleshed out piano accompaniment, or something that sounds orchestral, or something that sounds like a rock band. And sure, you can notate that stuff, but often the scores that we get in terms of accompaniments are quite skeletal and quite basic. And then there's some shows where they want me to come up with some sort of music for a scene change or something like that, so you sit at the piano and just make something up and say, will this do? So I think improvisation's a useful skill. I know a lot of pianists swear by improvisation in terms of it making their playing better, and understanding the sort of spontaneity of music and it improving their playing. I'm not one of those pianists, but maybe improvising to the extent that I do does help with my playing and does affect it. Who knows? But I'm not one of those people who spends, an hour a day improvising in order to really feel what it's like to spontaneously create something. But I suppose performing, there's always a bit of improvising in terms of, spontaneity of interpretation and whatnot. And we know that Liszt improvised a lot of cadenzas. We know Chopin improvised his Fioritura. So maybe I should do more improvising. I would rather spend my time learning pieces I love.
That is totally fair.
I'd rather, dedicate time to learning, someone else has already done a great job of improvising and something extraordinary and have written it down. I'll learn those. But I mean, I have to improvise for my job sometimes.
Well, this is a good transition into talking about the actual purpose of this interview, which is to promote your upcoming album, Rediscovering Liszt. First of all, thank you so much for sharing the album with me. I only had a chance to listen to about half of the album before this interview. I wish I had listened to it in full. I'm entering our conversation woefully unprepared. The pieces I did listen to, though, they reminded me a lot of Salati's documentation of Un Sospiro by Liszt. For those who don't know, Liszt once gave a performance of Un Sospiro, which he was constantly modifying, both in print and spontaneously in the moment when he played it. And Alexander Salati, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, I'm sure you guys will correct me, one of Liszt's students, was present for one of these performances, and he was so enamored with all of the moments that Liszt played that he wrote down as much of what Liszt did in the moment, or maybe after the fact, I don't remember. And to my knowledge, there's only one recording out there of what Salati wrote down, and it's just so grandiose and Lisztian, and your album just brings out that feeling in so many ways. So this is just such a wonderful project that you've made, tying Liszt's legacy in the 21st century with all the documented ways he championed the piano in the 19th century. And so I was just wondering, what was your motivation for making this album?
Well, I mean, for a start, going back to Un Sospiro, I know exactly what you're talking about, and yes, there's all sorts of stuff that Liszt played in that piece that Liszt didn't write, and I think in Lena Rahman, who was one of Liszt's biographers, and she wrote something called The Pedagogium, which I think I may be mispronouncing that horrifically, but it's this great sort of treatise that deals with about 9 or 10, maybe more of Liszt's pieces, and one of them is, I think if memory serves me correctly, Un Sospiro, and she also notates a lot of his variants and a lot of his alternative cadenzas. I think Un Sospiro particularly was one of those pieces that Liszt was aware he was adding a lot to, and I think wanted to capture it before he died when he was quite old. And yes, and Salati also contributed to that, and there's quite a few on my CD, my recording of Reminiscences de Lucia di Lammermoor. We have a similar story with Adolf von Henselt, who also heard Liszt play the piece and observed Liszt was adding all sorts of cadenzas and variants and ornaments, and Salati, Henselt, published his edition of Lucia, which contains all of these variants. And Liszt, late in life, said to his students, you must learn this piece, not from my edition, but from Henselt's edition, because he included everything he heard from me, and Liszt said he always played these pieces very freely and not as notated, is his quote. So these sorts of little additions give us as best a clue as we have into how Liszt might have played them, or even what Liszt played, because that's in question too. This all really came about when I had just graduated. I mean, long story short, when I just graduated, I didn't really know what to play. I did my master's in conducting, not in the piano. And suddenly I felt so liberated from exams and criteria and set pieces and rules, and I thought I can play anything in the world. What am I going to play? So I thought, well, I love Liszt. I've always loved Liszt. What was Liszt playing? Liszt made such a huge stratospheric career out of just playing the piano. How? What did he play? What did he do? I thought maybe I could do the same. So I sort of looked at not pieces Liszt wrote, but more pieces Liszt was playing, when he was in his sort of 20s and 30s. And to my surprise, there's no real definitive catalogue of all of his programs, even though so many of them exist, and we have lots of them. There's no sort of volume, which are all the programs that Liszt played. So that sort of started years of detective work, collecting all these programs. And then a few years later, I thought, well, how was he playing them? I was just trying to improve my own knowledge, in terms of, we have so much information into Baroque performance practice and classical performance practice, and I wasn't aware of much romantic performance practice. And I discovered a wonderful book about 5 years ago called Off the Record by Neil Perez da Costa, who's an incredible musicologist and a performer. And this book just blew my mind. He talks about these traits and mannerisms that have been preserved only in piano rolls and in early recordings and in treatises, and we have this huge body of evidence which suggests the way they played back then was so different to the way they played now. Not just improvising cadenzas, not just coming up with new things, but the style they played and their attitudes and relationship to rhythm and tempo and synchronicity and how notes were lined up was completely different. And this just blew my mind. And this book blew my mind, and I listened to all these old piano rolls and all the first recordings that we have and recordings of the oldest pianists. We have a piano roll by Carl Reinecke, who was born in 1824, and he was a colleague of Liszt's. He taught Liszt's daughter the piano. And we have piano rolls of him playing, and it sounds unlike anything we've ever heard. It sounds bizarre and alien and strange, incredibly expressive, incredibly spontaneous and sort of improvisatory. So I found this book and it just blew me away, and I love a detective job. I love being a historian. I love mysteries and hunting for things and crusades. So I just sort of put it all together and thought, no one knows about this, no one's playing like this, and it just felt so obvious to recreate Liszt's recitals, because no one's doing that either. And considering the guy was the most prolific, famous, celebrity rock star pianist, surely someone must have thought at some point, well, what did he do? And very few have, and to my knowledge, there's no sort of real thorough recreation of his recitals until this CD comes out in July. But it's wild. It's like, imagine we knew about the Beatles, but we didn't know what was on their album. We knew Queen performed at Live Aid, but we don't know what they sang or how they sang it. It's that level of sort of mystery. It's bizarre. You'd put in so much work into finding out what they did. So yeah, that's how it all came about. I'm shocked that no one's done it sooner, or if they have, I wish I knew about it, and I wish they do it louder.
As someone who considers himself something of a historian, although in different niches, to my knowledge, there's no album out there like this. Granted, I haven't looked very hard. This album is just so unique in capturing Liszt's spirit so completely, and to turn that energy into a Liszt recital we can get on a CD is just so wonderful. This leads me to my next question, which is the program of the CD based on an existing concert program?
Yeah, there's two programs in there. So Liszt would very seldom play the same program twice. One of the most played recital programs he played only about sort of 5 or 6 times in Germany in the 40s, and that's on the CD. So we've got the William Tell Overture, followed by his fantasy on Lucia di Lammermoor by Donizetti, followed by his fantasy on Don Giovanni by Mozart, the reminiscences of Don Juan, followed by Schubert Serenade, followed by Elf King, followed by the Grand Galop Chromatique, which was his favourite encore. That's a programme. Then another programme might have like 3 of those pieces plus 2 others, and 4 of those pieces plus another. He played all of these pieces hundreds of times with other pieces. So also on the CD is Ave Maria, the Schubert song, which he played all the time in combination with other pieces. We've also got the cute little fantasy on 2 songs by Rossini, which was an earlier work by Liszt, but cropped up again in the 1840s. He sort of revised it and came up with his second version in the 40s and started playing it again, along with William Tell and Don Juan. So, I mean, there's definitely one program on the CD with 2 extras thrown in. I think out of those pieces, you could probably combine them to make 3 programs that Liszt played. But the main impetus was that sort of 1841 or 1842, I think 42, program that he played in Germany about 5 times. William Tell, Lucia, Don Juan, Stanchen, El Koenig, Grand Gallic Chromatique, and that's the most sort of standard, staple sort of recital. He'd replace one piece with another, but that's pretty much the sort of recitals he would be playing.
Great, yeah. This is such a cool concept for an album. One of the tracks I did get to listen to was Liszt's arrangement of the Schubert song Ave Maria, and I was particularly struck by how long and extended the ending section was.
Yeah, there's a really long sort of meditative coda at the end, yeah.
And I hadn't seen that in the editions I came across. And so that's why I started this conversation about improvisation, because I was like, did you just come up with that? Is that based off of existing material that Liszt wrote? What's going on there?
Yeah, so this is the first version of Liszt's transcription of Ave Maria. Of course, Leslie Howard has recorded it, because he's recorded all of Liszt's works, and I think there might be another rogue recording on YouTube of the first version that may be MIDI, I'm not sure. But generally, this first version of Ave Maria, no one's heard and no one plays. And it's pretty much the song we know up until the end, and in the second version, Liszt just sort of ends it where it should end, and that's it. In this first version, there's this long, strange, meditative coda where he's sort of alternating between, he's sort of going between B flat, then he's sort of in G flat, then he's in E minor, strange arpeggios, and this very long sort of... And it's this sort of like a prayer. It's like an organ prayer. It's all Liszt. It's all in his first version. It's very ahead of its time. He's sort of dancing between chords that ought not to be danced with in the 1830s. And it's sort of looking forward to definitely Liszt as a composer, even late Liszt. He's really sort of going between chords entirely afunctionally in terms of tonality. So it's a very strange ending. It's a very meditative, futuristic way to end the piece. And it does go on a long time. And if you really follow the tempo indications and the tempo relations, it's probably slower than how I played it. It's incredibly slow, and whether that is what Liszt meant, who knows. But I think it's fascinating, and I think the fact that no one plays it is a jolly good reason to play it and to record it and to explore it and sort of show it off to the world. I think it's extraordinary.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask this next question a bit selfishly, just to do my own spiel on Liszt for a bit. In terms of classical music personalities, Liszt is easily my favorite. I found him to be the most, open-minded and adaptable, which are qualities I admire deeply. And if you look at the multiple versions of the Paganini etudes or the Transcendental etudes, and if you look at the shapes of his music over time, you learn so much about his values and how they were shaped by his yearn for experimentation or by critics around him. Like, on top of being an innovator, he was also very much for the people. So to that end, my question for you is, why Liszt for this album? Like, why rediscovering Liszt as opposed to rediscovering Chopin or Bach or Beethoven?
Great. Yeah, great. I mean, just straight off the bat of that, picking up on a few things you said, I'm also baffled at the criticisms that he received in his lifetime. And I think the one that is the saddest is from Chopin. And Chopin really, Chopin didn't really like many people at all, but he really was not into Liszt's sort of transcriptions, and certainly not Liszt's compositions at the time. Liszt hadn't really become a fully flourished composer until after he'd retired from performing at age 30, 35 or 36 at the end of the 1840s. And that's when he wrote all the pieces, that he's famous for, the sonata, Année de Pèlerinage, the ballades. And Chopin never got to hear them. And that's so sad, because I really hope Chopin would have had some respect for, for those pieces, for the legends, and for the consolations and the Liebestrom. So yeah, I'm also baffled at the criticism he faced. I think it's jealousy, who knows. But why Liszt? Oh gosh, I am so attracted to extremity as an expressive tool and as a legitimate artistic device. And from a really surface level point of view, difficulty and virtuosity in music, people for some reason sort of disparage this and are turned off by overly virtuosic music or things that are virtuosic for the sake of being virtuosic. I think that's thrilling! Why? It's exciting and it's like a magic trick and it's mysterious and wild. And I find, not virtuosity for the sake of virtuosity, but virtuosity as a device, extremity as an expressive device, incredibly enticing. In the same way as if I want to see a scary movie, I want to see a very scary movie. I want to see the scariest. I want to see the most extreme. If I'm looking at a large piece of art, I want to see what's the largest piece of art that's ever been made. So extremity has something to do with it, and Liszt was the most famous man on the planet, possibly, along with Napoleon and Queen Victoria. And was thought of as the greatest pianist, or one of the greatest pianists during his lifetime, along with Thalberg. And now years later, he's kind of remembered and considered the greatest pianist. And you get 100 musicians together and say, who's the greatest pianist that's ever lived? And you're going to get 100 people saying, or at least mentioning, Liszt. And none of them have heard him play. None of us have heard Liszt play, and none of us will hear Liszt play. And somehow his legend has lived on. And there's something about just the guy specifically. He looked good, he dressed good, he was such a rock star with the hair and the costumes, and had this mad life of all the travel and all the partying and the dancing with the gypsies and the absinthe and the cigars, and then also, this deeply religious, devout man. It's like a sort of Hollywood movie. You can't make this stuff up. So I think Liszt as a human I find very enticing and attractive, and the whole mystique around him as a pianist and the superlative nature of his reputation. And then after all that, you get the music he wrote, which, I'm not going to talk for ages about his music because lots of other people have, but I think it's really good. And that's kind of all I need to say about it. I think it's some of the best. So I think that attracted me to Liszt. I think let's start with the big guns. I'm sure in the future there'll be a rediscovering Chopin and a rediscovering Mozart and a rediscovering, everyone. Why not? Let's rediscover them all. But Liszt felt like the composer I love the most, the composer I've played the most, the composer I've know the most. It was a no-brainer. He was the guy I was going to make this CD on. And I find my research into historical playing styles is as much about specifically Liszt as well, and research into Liszt's playing style and Liszt's recitals. I find that just as exciting as the general research into what general pianism was like back in the mid-1800s. Yeah, it was always Liszt. Liszt he's the one, he's the guy. He's just so cool, and just so enticing and so wonderful.
That is just so wonderful. On the note of extremes, that is something that I also explore on my channel.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you look at the extremes, you do learn something about, the middling part of the, whatever art you're trying to look into, honestly. Once you know what can be done, you'll get a sense of, everything that can be done.
Right, yeah. I love, you don't include this, but it's the similar thing I get with numbers. I love large numbers, and obviously numbers are infinite, but when you sort of explore, the largest numbers that we have notated and the principles of infinity and all that sort of stuff, it's just so much bigger than we think. And then suddenly, the 3 times 4 seems so humble and so easy to grasp. It's kind of similar in music, and not that, difficult music, simple music, it's all music, and what is difficulty, really?
Yeah, we can include that because honestly, I don't know that I would have an appreciation for extremes if I wasn't also like a math nerd when I was a kid.
You a math guy? Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh god. It's my other obsession. Set theory and Cantor and all of that stuff. I'm into all that a lot.
When they announce like the next biggest prime number, I genuinely get excited.
Right. And when they found the last digit of Graham's number, it was like, how have you figured this out? Yeah, exactly. There's something so attractive about the inaccessible and the unreachable and the extreme.
Yeah. I love that you touch on virtuosity for virtuosity's sake, or like, that's not always like the reason to do something, but there's something exciting about it that gets people excited too. And I wish there are these like, especially my audience, or not my audience, but people who happen to come across my videos on YouTube, these people who are so critical of like all like Liszt and Alkan had to offer was their technique. And I'm just like, you are missing the music. You're missing some very gorgeous music when you have that mindset,
It's, I've got so much to say on this, but I think, Reminiscences de Don Juan, which is on my CD, and it's a piece that Liszt played a lot. He clearly loved the piece. It clearly went down very well with audiences. And it is, if you type into Google, hardest piano piece ever written, as we all have, it often pops up in lists. It's not the hardest piece ever written, and it's probably not the hardest piece that Liszt wrote, but it's very difficult sounding, and it's very relentless, and it's long, and it's got all sorts of different textures and writing in it, and fast double thirds and fast jumps. It's got a bit of everything in it. It's quite famous for being difficult. But you know what? I've played it so much in so many concerts. I played in most of my concerts, and it goes down so well with every audience, whether they're just, a very general audience in a church, or whether they're a sort of seasoned concert-goer audience. People love it. And yeah, of course, it's so hyper-virtuosic, and it's so fun, and it's so wild and bubbly, and, dare I say, entertaining. And people think that's like a negative, and that it's just virtuosity for virtuosity's sake, and the last cadence goes on for 2 minutes, and it's really manipulative because it's just forcing the audience into a frenzy. Yeah, that's the genius of the guy. It is manipulative. He knew what he was doing. He's manipulating the audience to go wild, and it's in all of his pieces from this, or it's in a lot of the pieces from this period, and that's kind of the joy of him, and that tradition has continued right up to now. When you get, bands like Queen or the Beatles or people like Lady Gaga or just anyone, that is able to whip an audience up into a frenzy. Liszt sort of uncovered that back in the day. I think virtuosity is a wonderful thing. If the music was naff, if we were just dealing with very simple, boring music and it was overly virtuosic, would I have the same response? I don't know. But I think the music's, interesting and rich and beautiful and insightful and memorable and well-crafted. I think I can give it all the compliments that it has. A piece like the Grand Galop Chromatique often comes under fire for this. People say, there's no real music there, it's just virtuosity. For a start, it's not that virtuosic. It's hard, but it's not like Don Juan. And people say there's not that much music there, and I just think, what are you hearing? The melody is a chromatic line moving up the piano, while the accompaniment is chords 1 and 5. That already is bizarre. And then in the coda, he's got these sort of descending sequences going down by the whole tone scale. In 1830, really? And people say, this is just mindless, showy off, you're just showing off technique and all that. I don't know what people have got against the guy, or what people have got against this music. If the music itself was really boring and didn't have much interest, melodically, harmonically, or structurally, I'd give in. But it's got all of that, plus virtuosity.
Yeah, it's when you appreciate, when you understand this and really appreciate him, one, it's hard to avoid the comparison to, rock stardom. Two, like pieces like the Grand Galop Chromatique are just so fun.
Yeah.
Everything else aside, it's just a very fun piece to listen to. Just can't imagine having complaints about that, but people find a way. I wish people put that energy more into appreciation rather than criticism.
Honestly, I know, and I'm not going to rant anymore, but you go on YouTube and look at the comments under the top performances of the Grand Galop Chromatique, and so many people are just saying, oh, there's no real music here. Oh, it's impressive, but, it's not musically rich or musically interesting. And... oh my gosh, right? Like, what do you want? I think it's... And why is fun a bad thing? I love fun music. I happen to like fun, as it goes.
This is probably, I think, a good way to tail this off. Is that, like, it's nice that pieces like the Grand Galop Chromatique or pieces like the Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, which I remember reading Liszt got tired of playing that for his students. There's a point where he just cut it off and was like, no more, I'm not playing this anymore.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that those pieces were so famous back then, and they still resonate with us kind of in the same exact way today. Like, fun back then is fun today,
Yeah, I mean, the Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, in particular, it's one of those pieces I can remember seeing Lang Lang play on the Royal Variety Show in the UK when I was about 12 or something. And he played the Horowitz transcription, which is wonderful, and it just blew my mind as a 12-year-old, before I really knew like what Liszt was or what the piano was or any of this. It just absolutely knocked me sideways, and this intoxicating tune that doesn't occur that much in the piece. It happens for 4 bars in the middle, and then other things happen, but everyone remembers the main theme of that, and it is so fun and so intoxicating. And as a 12-year-old, that just blew me away. And I think that probably started me off onto Liszt and onto, being serious about the piano. So yeah, fun then is fun now, absolutely. And Liszt did absolutely get tired of hearing the Hungarian Rhapsody and playing the thing. But yeah, and all the reports of audiences at his recitals, fainting and screaming and losing their minds over pieces like, it's not on the CD, but his Reminiscences de Robert le Diable, which is this great infernal waltz, this minor waltz that's very fabulous and over the top, and then he weaves 2 separate themes together, as Liszt often does, and it's ever so fun, it's ever so camp, and it's so over the top, and people just lost their minds. People couldn't believe what they were hearing, and of course, we all love, dare I say, more, to use quotation marks, serious music, like, I don't know, Chopin or Schumann or even Liszt when he goes there. But, there's no reports of ladies fainting and screaming over nocturnes. And don't get me wrong, Chopin is one of my favourite composers, and the nocturnes are some of my favourite stuff. But, oh gosh, fun then was absolutely fun now. And these pieces, like I said earlier, Reminiscences de Don Juan, I play that all the time, and audiences really do whoop at the end and cheer at the end, still to this day. And I think there is something so primal and so joyful and cheeky and mischievous and fun about these pieces that still absolutely resonates with audiences nearly 200 years later. Still tickles the same part of the brain that it did then.
Connor Fogel, this has been such an electrifying discussion. Rediscovering Liszt coming out July 10th. Are there any messages you'd like to give to budding pianists to sign off this interview?
Find something you love and become obsessed with it. In a healthy, wonderful, nurturing way. Find the thing that you love. Don't get stuck in the pieces that your teacher wants you to play or the pieces you have to play for your recital. Find the music that makes you set ablaze and want to play more. Find that and become obsessed with it. I wish I'd become obsessed with this stuff 10, 20 years ago, back when I had so much more time and so much more energy. So yeah, become obsessed, become weird about it in the most wonderful, fabulous way.
Awesome. Love it. It's been such a pleasure being able to talk with you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the publication of the album. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.